The concept of the album, it kind of came about in a very weird way. Because I used to go to the library and I was a kid. I used to always go to the ghost story section. It would always be checking those books out. And there was a book called Ghosts, Ghosts, Ghosts that I just dug the illustrations in and all of that stuff. One of the stories in there was called House of Ocean-Born Mary, and I remember that the really creepy looking picture of this white figure that was going to the well, and these kids were like staring. It was a specter that would show up at the house. So it's sitting here one day, and Keith comes over, and he's looking around, and he sees the book, and he goes, "Oh my God, I had this book when I was 13, you know, and you got to be kidding. I don't know anybody else that even read this book, you know." And on the big opus that we've called House of Ocean-Born Mary, it's basically about the relationship between this woman who is born at sea and this captain, Captain Pedro, and all the things that go on in their lives and how it relates basically to the human condition. The lyrics have a lot of references to the story, but they also have a lot of references to modern day society and how really nothing ever changes in the human condition.
Not only injected new life into classics from my past and offered a different dimension to them. His use of his many guitars into the aspect of making them very orchestral and creating a huge orchestral collage out of all the colorations of what I've written.
At one point, we had been approached on the tour to if we thought about doing an album together. And we kind of looked at each other and went, well, yeah, maybe we should do something together. That might be good. But I warned him, I said, being an ELP fan and being a Keith Emerson fan, I know what I want to hear from you. If you give me the permission to get it out of you, great, let's do it. But I remember seeing a tape of him with the other guys in Emerson, Lake and Palmer, with Carl and Greg, when he was teaching them parts of the Third Impression. And to see the drive in his eye and in the body language, everything, there was all this just complete commitment to his art, and that fire and that passion. It's like, that's what I want to see. It's just a question of being comfortable enough to let it out. And there's a big trust factor that's involved with this kind of stuff.
This is what I like about this album, and especially working with Marc, who has such a great vision of orchestration and how to develop ideas. He's got, both he and I are on the same wavelength when it comes down to talking about any form of music. We communicate because we have the same dialogue. We both immediately understand each other. A lot of things that Marc does here in the studio is he'll just have me jam. But he'll say, "What is that you just played?" And I don't know. No, do that again. Well, normally I don't do the same thing again, because a lot of what I do is based upon improvisation. And he has to copy out on probably on computer, like, you know, God, if I've got to play that again, I need to know what it is that I did.
One of the challenges for me was trying to figure out which take I was going to use, because I was cursed with having too much good material. It's like, man, I don't want to lose this, but this is great too. So, you know, that was a struggle for me, is trying to sort out all the filet from the filet.
It was important for me to establish the vintage instruments which I played in the earlier days, but incorporating newer technology in resurrecting their sounds, such as the Moog modular system, the Hammond C3, and also, of course, the acoustic piano.
And then we used a lot of the Reactor, which is a software program by Native Instruments It's very, very deep, and Stevie had turned me on to that program and says, man, you can get any sound you want if you want to spend long enough with it, because it's extremely deep and it sounded like a challenge. So it was great. We got a lot of good stuff on there. And then, you know, a few sundry items from the Triton, definitely from the Korg Oasis, we got a lot of things. You know, slide whistles we brought in. Keith Wexler played Jew's harp on one part. You know, a little banjo here and there, just basically, you know, a whole sundry of items on and beyond just the big staples. Okay, good, that's good.
How does a woman with big tits play this thing?
Very carefully.
They go, ah!
Marc Bonilla has an amazing collection of guitars, amazing collection of equipment, and a brilliant facility with the instruments. He has brought an interesting pop element to this record that is rich and accessible, but an edge to it that keeps it from being your run-of-the-mill pop song. And Edge has such an intensity. It's a dark, scary place in there, but you're not afraid to go there with him. With Keith Emerson, it's a bit different. You see this band live, and not only does he go right up to the line, but he crosses the line, and it's like two wheels are off the roadway on a cliff over the side, and you just, you know, usually barely get back on the road and then make the turn. You don't know how he made it, and it's an exhilarating ride, like the roller coaster.
We shot the video stuff out at Borrego Springs, which is 20 miles from the Salton Sea, which is the most desolate place on the planet Earth. My friend Michael Tweed is a photographer, and he had the idea that he wanted to do a piano burn out in the desert. I said, oh, let me ask Keith if he's into doing something like that. And of course he was. Anything to do with anything that's life-threatening, Keith totally in for. So, you know, he said, yeah, that'd be great. Whose piano are we gonna burn? Garen Lacombe, who restores pianos, caught wind of it and said, hey, I've got a piano that has, you know, a soundboard that I don't think I'm gonna be able to repair. Michael found, through a location scout, found Stuart and Bonnie Rezer, who had this great piece of property, like 70 acres out in the middle of Borrego Springs, and hauled this piano out in the middle of nowhere. Had a pyrotechnician out there and started doing all sorts of, you know, mayhem to it.
We had a grand piano out there, which accidentally caught fire.
Keith said, well, I want to play it while it's on fire. You know, I said, well, go ahead, you know, and so he was at it, man. He wasn't, you know, he didn't think he was going to be doing this, but no, he was in there like, no, this is normal. Look, pal, I've been up in the air spinning on a piano. What's this burning? Nothing, you know. And we had the fire, you know, the pyrotechnician was there ready to put that thing out because the winds start coming up. And then at one point, the fire department was coming out. Chief Thompson and the guys from the Borrego Springs Fire Department were right on the case, and it had come out and ended up just hanging out and having a good time. So it was great. All these guys were great, and everybody was happy. Actually happy we were there setting fire to something. It was just a great experience all the way around, and you know, I had to take my suit to the cleaners. Had smoke in my jacket. It was a smoking jacket.
So it was another sort of incident of what I would refer to as destructive art.